Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here. And in robot tax news, because apparently that's a thing, we've got to talk about it because I think the robot taxes are on their way. Now, it kind of reminded me as I was reading this in TechCrunch. It was an article by Brian Heater, but it kind of reminded me of that old quote on the government's view of economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it. Now, I think that's interesting. I think it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I think the government's taxation scheme and economy is vastly more complex than that, but that's the first thing that popped into my head. And so here's the logic that Brian Heater of TechCrunch laid out, and I think, honestly, he's dead on. So consider it this way. Robots have and will continue to impact jobs. The presence of robots in the workforce is growing at a rapid rate. The more prevalent and sophisticated automation becomes, the greater impact it will have on the way we work. And I think he's absolutely correct on that. And I would add that estimates have already said that 300 million jobs will be impacted by automation and robotics, with 30 million just straight up losing their jobs. On top of that, there have been articles about displacement over AI, that those employees that fail to learn and adopt and use artificial intelligence basically are going to lose their jobs, as those that learn about AI will keep theirs. So if we're talking about this as a backdrop, a robot tax may not necessarily be a bad thing to offset some of this disruption, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to let you decide on that one. I do think we're overtaxed in general in societies. I think most people do. But if we are focusing on the robot tax, the Brookings Institute described the concept as such, and I quote, "The basic idea behind a robot tax is that firms pay a tax when they replace a human worker with a robot. Such a tax would, in theory, have two main purposes. First, it would disincentivize firms from replacing workers with robots, therefore maintaining human employment. Second, if the replacement were made anyway, a robot tax would generate revenues for the government that would cover the loss of revenue from payroll taxes." Now, back in 2017, TechCrunch also ran a column by Steve Cousins that concluded with, and I quote, "Getting companies to pay their fair share of taxes won't solve the larger societal challenge that automation will eventually displace low-skilled workers, nor would a robot tax. Instead, government should focus on using corporate tax revenues to create free or low-cost education programs to prepare people to work alongside automation." And that is, I think, one of the big cruxes that we have to look at longitudinally as we look at robotics and automation moving forward. We're going to have people that are displaced, and it's not like the population is going to stop growing around the world. And so having concepts or debating on concepts openly and honestly about things like robot taxes, that could, let's say, go into retraining people in new skills and all of that, especially for low skills, or maybe provide universal basic income or something along those lines, actually needs to really have its day in the sun. We need to have this conversation. I don't know if something like a universal basic income or a robot tax is good or bad, but I do know that longitudinally the population is going to grow, and if jobs become more scarce by virtue of that, even as, let's say, business expands around the world, then we've got a very serious problem on our hands. I mean, look at any basically platform that you can think of, or vertical that you can think of that could use robotics as opposed to humans. That I think is something that we really need to understand. And on a construction site, if a robot can drywall a building, or a level of a building in a single day, which there is a robot that can do that, then all it needs is drywall. It doesn't stop, doesn't need breaks, doesn't, get paid overtime, et cetera, et cetera. It just keeps on moving as long as it has drywall. That becomes very appealing to the owner of the construction company because, quite frankly, it's cheaper in the long run than having to hire labor, whether it's union or otherwise. And so these are things that we really have to have serious discussions on. And if we're not having these discussions, what's going to happen is we're going to have a snowball effect in the sense that automation will continue to displace. We don't have a proper plan in place to basically look at what could be a large burgeoning homeless population, which is already an issue in some cities as well due to rising housing costs and everything else. And so this is all interconnected. We can't not look at this longitudinally as a society. So I'll leave you with that. I'd love to have the open discussion here, but quite frankly, I think Reagan was right. If there's going to be robots, there's going to be a robot tax. And while he didn't say that, that's what he predicted. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.